we'll get set to begin. The candidates got the rules beforehand, and the moderators won't hesitate to interrupt if they have to, but feel free to talk as long as you want. All right, well, we'll get started with the VP of Student Organizations candidates, that office, and we'll bring that group up right now. And so we have Malia.
Hey.
She is Skyping in from abroad. And so is Amanda, but she's running for finance, so we'll talk to her a little bit. So.
Hey. Oh, yeah.
All right, so if Malia, you'd like to start by giving us a little introduction. You have a minute, 30 seconds.
Awesome. Well, my name is Malia. I'm a student in the College of Arts and Sciences. I'm studying political science, American Studies, and I'm minoring in Spanish. So I'm originally from anyone close to me knows that I have an excess of the spirit. And I've been part of SGA since my first semester here, so about a year and a half now, a little bit longer than that. And for the whole time I've been a part of this Committee for Student Organizations, which works closely with the Vice President of Student Organizations, the role I'm running for. And then last semester with Chandler, I co-chaired the Student Outreach Committee. And we kind of pioneered the website, a few other things that you've seen around campus. And the website is something I'd like to focus on again for being Vice President of Student Organizations in order to make that information a little bit more accessible for students as in terms of like leaders of the pack information, leadership transitions information. I think it would all be a lot easier to access on the site. I would also like to encourage like SGA members to be present at more CSO events and work with Caitlin to ensure that the student organizations and offices of lounge spaces on campus get to keep those spaces, and we keep expanding like new spaces for new student organizations. So those are the main points, and yeah.
Thank you. Alana? You can, come to the front. Oh yeah, dead center.
Hey, my name is Alana Jansen. I'm a junior here studying social work in the College of Public Health and Social Justice, and I'm running for VP for Student Organizations. I've been able to talk to a few different student organizations here on campus, and the main things that I've seen that they kind of need are more areas of communication, so opening up those points of contact, not only me myself, but also several different people, so that there's different points of contact that they can feel like they have someone that's going to listen to them and actually act on what they're saying. Another thing is supporting new organizations coming to campus, but also not forgetting those that are established here on campus and making sure that they have the support that they need and the resources that they desire, and also making sure that access is super known for all of the different organizations here, so making sure that they not only are aware of the resources, but have the necessary places they can go in order to feel that they are utilizing those resources to their full potential. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks.
You can stay up, we're going to do all your questions.
Good evening. So, Alana, in a time when student organizations are currently $200,000 underfunded, and we're expecting 5 to 10 new organizations to be in charter for the next fiscal year, how do you plan on working with these organizations when they'll most likely be underfunded?
Sure, so I think that there's a lot of ways that we can kind of take student organizations, look at their strengths, and seeing which strengths organizations can use, maybe pull organizations together and use those strengths in different ways. So not only having organizations feel like they're standing alone and like they're the only ones up against all these different things, but using resources that all organizations can maybe pool and make sure that they students can just access those things and make sure that, I don't know, yeah, so using different resources, pulling the organizations together, and maybe making sure that student organizations don't feel like they're just by themselves, but that there's a net of people that are there to support them.
Thank you. Malia?
Yeah, I would agree with what Lon said. I think it's really important that student organizations know that they can work together to fundraise a little bit more efficiently. So an example would be like two student organizations that have a similar mission or work with similar groups of people having like a joint fundraiser and splitting the funds. That way, both organizations can pool a little bit more people than they would by themselves, especially with those smaller student organizations or the newer student organizations that we're seeing on campus. There's also an issue on the ballot to raise the student activity fee, and if that fee got raised, depending on how much, it would help us allocate a little bit more funds for that. But it's also important to note that like the VP of Finance will have a huge role in that process as well. So working with whoever becomes the VP of Finance, who's just running on my team, so she can probably talk a little bit more about that too during her.
Perfect, thank you. Alana, would you like a 30-second response, or do you have anything else you'd like to say? If not, you don't have to take it.
I mean, sure. So just kind of with the student activities fee being raised, I think while there could be a lot of value and that could add a lot to different organizations, like knowing that there's still more ways we could look at it and make sure we're hearing all voices surrounding that, and the vote would be a great way to do that, just making sure that every single student has a say in that, and that it's not just something that is thrown in randomly, but that it's like has value.
Malia, your response?
Well, yeah, on the ballot there's just a couple different tiered options. So there's an option for not raising the fee, raising it a little bit, raising a little bit more. That's definitely something that the student voice needs to be heard on. So I totally agree, Alana. And if not, there are totally different other ways that we can work with student organizations to help bring them up financially.
Perfect.
So Malia, this question's going to you first. You both kind of touched on it in your opening statements, but could you describe in more detail your experience working with student organizations and how this experience has, how that experience will influence your work as Vice President of student organizations if you get elected?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, I have been on the committee for student organizations for a little bit, and that entails working with a few of the past vice presidents for student organizations, kind of getting a feel for that role already. And then also, like, I have been involved in a couple of student organizations as not like an exempt member or anything like that, but Dance Marathon, Overground Railroad, I've been a member of them, so I kind of have got like the two different sides of it. I know kind of the behind the scenes work that SGA puts in, and then also the benefit that that can like render in just an average student.
Thank you. Alana?
Yeah, so I've been able to be in several different organizations here on campus. I don't have any experience here at SGA, but I think that that is a different way to look at the processes that are going to be brought. So coming in with fresh eyes, being able to maybe see what's working really well and what can be improved. So coming in with those fresh eyes, just being able to ask questions that might not have been asked before, and being able to like push the boundaries a little bit in what I can bring to the table to SGA.
Thank you. Malia, would you like 30 seconds? Or you can pass?
I'm going to pass it.
Pass as well? Perfect.
All right, and one last question from us. We can start with Alana. What is one thing you'd like to change as VP of Student Organizations?
Sure. I think that making the process of becoming chartered more streamlined, so giving people different options of how to look at how to be a chartered organization, not just a flow chart, but also like maybe a video, maybe if they want to sit one-on-one and have that conversation, but making sure that that is easily understandable. And again, making sure that student organizations that are already chartered feel like they have the support and the resources, and that we're not just like pushing them aside and pushing more organizations through. So really fostering that sense of support throughout all student organizations as well as chartered student organizations.
Thank you. Malia?
Yeah, so two of the big things I would focus on. The first is Leaders in the Path, which is the like fall leadership orientation kind of that we have for all of the groups on campus. The second one is leadership transitions, which happen in April, that the Vice President of Student Organizations would lead. And it's basically both of them are kind of conference style right now. and I would really like to reform those a little bit and make them a little bit more individualized for each student organization. So obviously every organization has different needs, they're different sizes, have different people in them, and they do things like leadership transitions at different times in the year. So making that process, however that may look, either doing smaller conferences, maybe one-on-one sessions, maybe grouping student organizations into a group, and then working with those groups individually. I would really like to explore those options, and then obviously putting all that information on the website to get it a little bit more accessible for those organizations who may not be able to come, or make more personalized. Oh, sorry.
Perfect, thank you. Oh, you're fine. Alana, any other points you'd like to make? All right. You do get 30 more seconds if you want to, Malia.
Oh, no, sorry.
No, you're fine. All right. And that is all that the commission has. Are there any questions from the audience that anyone would like to ask to these candidates? No? All right. Well, thank you so much for being here today. Oh, do we have one?
Yes.
We do have one. Perfect.
Hi, I guess you both kind of touched on briefly making sure current student orgs feel supported, and I would just like you all to go, if you could, a little more in depth on that, because like, hey, support, like that's a great buzzword, but how though?
Malia, you want to start with this one?
Yeah, sure. So one of my big things is making sure all the resources are out there on the website. And I think that is really important to make sure that student organizations feel like they have that ease of access. If they do have a question, they can go there first. But then also, obviously, to stick to my office hours that I would have every week, make sure I'm really available by email, all that sort of thing. And then obviously those reforms on the leadership transitions, leaders of PAC, hopefully reforming that will make student organizations really feel as though like they have strong footing and right from the beginning. And that way, if they do have any questions, I'll have built that relationship already, and hopefully my committee will as well. So hopefully the student organizations feel like they can really lean on SGA for anything that they need.
Alana?
Right. So again, making that web of opportunity of conversation more wide, so not just myself as a point of contact, but making sure that you can go to several different people, and those people might be able to connect with your organization a bit more than just myself. I don't know everything there is to know about every single organization, and I think there's value in that, and other people in the team will be able to be that point of contact for you, that you feel like you have a connected bond with that person, and they're your resource to go to. Also, like seeing the strengths and what you bring as an organization, and connecting you maybe with a college or a professor or other faculty that really have something that pertains to the student organization, and that's just another great point of contact and resource that you can use to support you in your endeavors.
Perfect. All right. Are there any other questions from the audience? No? All right. Well, thank you so much for coming out tonight, guys. Malia will let you go, so you can go to bed since it's after 2 a.m. now.
Okay, good night, everyone.
And we'll move on to the VP of Finance position, which is Amanda and Pooja. Amanda, if you would like to start and give your opening statement, you can go right ahead.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yep, they can.
Okay, cool. All right, hi everybody. My name is Amanda Buchel. I am a second-year student at SLU. My background with the Finance Committee was that I was John Cook School Business Senator my freshman year, and then I served on the Finance Committee then. I have a bunch of other background stuff, but I kind of just want to touch on my campaign points and tell you what my goals are for this position. One of my biggest goals is giving more autonomy to student groups in the cutting process. We all know that cuts are inevitable, unfortunately. It stinks, but groups currently don't have a ton of autonomy over what is cut. Rather, we just look at the directives. So I'd like to change that process so students have more prioritization over those things, and I think that can be a really great tool. I also want to evaluate things such as the historical costs that we use and look into ways to measure that more effectively and more fairly, and then use more formalized techniques for cutting, such as percentages and things like that. So I know the cutting stuff is not that fun. The more fun stuff is streamlining some processes. So I'm sure all of you have sat through long workshops and things like that and read through the directives. I'd like to make some videos or infographics to go along with that. The VP of Finance and VP of ComSo this year have done a great job with cutting down the amount of material so that it's more readable, and I just want to continue that work. And then the last thing that I really believe in is that economic justice is a huge part of social justice in general. I think the job of the VP of Finance is seen as very narrow to the finance process, and I kind of want to expand that and really talk about how the VP of Finance weighs in on things like student scholarships, looks at things like unpaid internships and how that affects different types of students at SLU. And also looking at community involvement. There is a lot of economic injustice, as we know, in St. Louis, and I'd love to be an advocate for that through this position.
Perfect. Thank you, Amanda. Pooja?
Hi, my name is Pooja. I'm obviously running for VP of Finance. I am a junior here at SLU, studying health management and public health within the College of Public Health and Social Justice. In the past, I have served as a senator within Senate. And then I've also been on the Finance Committee for the past 2 years, kind of learning the ins and outs of behind working with 2 VPs of Finance. I've also served on the Wellness Committee this year. In addition, I've also served as the Finance Chair on a CSO, which kind of gives me the perspective as woodworking from a CSO and also woodworking from the Finance Committee. This year, I really want to work towards making sure communication with CSOs as the Finance Committee is increased. So currently, we really just fund students based on a 10 to 15 minute funding hearing. That's not necessarily the most effective way to hear about what a student organization does and how we can best support them. So I want to make sure that we're using the Finance Committee and our finance cabinets to really understand the student groups throughout the year, as well as making sure that we can help support them with their current budgets and altering for their future budgets. In addition, I want to make sure that the Wellness Fund is really hit on this year. We currently have this amazing fund of resources, but not all students on campus know about it, and it doesn't have a lot of structure. So I really want to make sure that we can all work towards making sure that SLU is a healthy campus, and all students can have a part in that.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Pooja, the first question will go to you.
Okay, so the first question is, what qualifies you for this position?
So like I said, I've had a lot of experience in SGA as well as being a CSO leader. But in addition, I am constantly making an effort to go to various CSO events as much as I possibly can. I have a lot of connections with other CSOs that I'm not necessarily a leader in, cultural groups, pre-professional organizations, all of that. So I kind of have a perspective of various CSOs that do various things and have various financial needs. And I think that that is extremely important for VP of Finance because all CSOs operate so differently. And if you're tunnel vision and only see one CSO's perspective, then you can't accurately fund and support all the other CSOs.
Perfect. Thank you. Amanda?
Okay, I also forgot to mention future economics in my consent. So just part of the qualification. Okay. So as far as my qualifications, I was a business school senator my freshman year. During that time, I served on the finance committee, went through the finance process, so I got some experience there. I am in several leadership positions throughout campus. In the business school, there's a thing called the Dean Student Advisory Board, and I'm on the executive board of that as an ad hoc chair. I also work in freshman in business. I'm on the board of that, so that's an example of where I'm on the other end of the table as a CSO and creating budgets and understanding that process. In addition to that, I have some not-for-profit experience in St. Louis, and the reason why that applies really well is because SLU's donation process is obviously a not-for-profit. So I worked for a not-for-profit right down the street. Additionally, this summer I'll be interning with a consulting firm, which I think will be really helpful for understanding and weighing in on things to do with Magis, because that was run by a consulting firm, Bain. So yeah, I think that I am pretty well-rounded in having SGA experience, having student organization experience, but then also having community experience for the things that aren't always student-facing that the VP of Finance weighs in on.
Thank you. Pooja, would you like 30 more seconds?
So I do think it is really important to focus on SLU's community, not just within, but also outside. But really, what I see from the role of the VP of Finance is working with students and for students, so that to make sure that the money that students are spending is well spent. So another thing I've been thinking of, and as being a student within the College of Public Health and Social Justice, we always see extra fees that are being added to various colleges, and not necessarily knowing where those dollars are going. So as a student within the College of Public Health and Social Justice, that's important.
Thank you. Amanda, you want 30 more seconds?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I definitely agree. Working for students is obviously always going to be the #1 goal. I think that my community experience has really given me a really great grasp of technology, and that's something that I want to use for students. I think it will be a lot easier to be able to fund every dollar and use funding more effectively when we can use data that we have from student organizations and use that effectively for students. So that's one thing that I really want to do.
Thank you. All right, for the next question, this will be for Pooja first.
All right.
You had the first one?
I think I had the last question first.
Yeah, excuse me. It'll be to Amanda first.
Okay, so the next question is, are you for or against releasing the budget CSOs submit during the funding directives, and why?
Okay, yeah, great question. Personally, I don't think that it should be such a hot button issue. If students want to see the budgets, I don't have a problem with it. That being said, all the budgets vary, but students can discern, this club has 150 members and this club has 10, and that's why this club gets that much more funding. If students really want to see that, I think it's a great accountability factor. I don't think it's the most pressing thing, so it's not something that I would personally put on a bill and try to pass that through Senate. If someone in the committee wanted to do that, or someone in Senate wanted to do that, I definitely hear both sides out. But it's not something that I have a very strong opinion on, because I don't think, in the grand scheme of things, that it's something that will really, really benefit students or really, really hurt students.
Perfect, thank you. Pooja?
So actually, the totals for the budgets for student groups are currently online. What's not online is the tables and all of the notes that the Finance Committee makes. So during the annual funding process, the Finance Committee makes various notes. We flag events to say, hey, maybe next year make improvements so that way the events are a little bit more successful. And that's up to the club's discretion on whether or not they want to share that with the rest of the SLU community. That's not something that the Finance Committee really should have control over, because that's their budget, but the totals are on the website.
Perfect. Amanda, would you like 30 more seconds?
Yeah, sure. So again, I think if clubs want to release that to the student body, then that's something that they can decide on through a vote. It is everybody's student activity fee, so I think ultimately it should be students' decision. But again, I've seen notes in the budgets, I've seen the line item requests. I don't think that they're going to cause an uproar, to say the least. So I definitely think it should be a student issue and decided by students.
Perfect, thank you. Pooja?
I don't really have any other comments.
Perfect.
So the next question is, in the event that the fee increase does not pass this year, how do you plan on cutting the budgets of current organizations to fund the 5 to 10 new organizations set to receive funding next year?
All right. So currently for the past 5 years, the annual the funding fee hasn't changed. So we have been chartering new CSOs every year for the past 5 years, and the current gap is $200,000. We all know that. But we have, this year we put in several other new measures of actually tracking how student groups are using their money. So event evaluations for events that cost more than a certain amount of money. We've also, again, we've used the flagging system. So if an event's not successful one year, we don't necessarily just cut it, but we do help the student organization learn how to succeed a little bit better, so that way next year the event turns out better. I also do think that we should be helping to foster more collaboration between student groups. So during the annual funding process, we get to hear about a lot of great ideas and a lot of student groups on campus, and having so many student groups, it's not always easy to know the ins and outs of every student CSO. So I definitely be working with the VP of CSOs for that.
Perfect, thank you. Amanda?
Okay, yeah, so in the event that it doesn't pass, so something just to be very upfront and clear, the last year we did try to pass the student activity fee raise and it did fail. So if it were to fail again, I wouldn't try to put it on the table for a third year in a row. I would really just focus on the infrastructure and processes and hope that in a few years or the next year someone else would raise it. But I think students have time and time again said we need to improve our processes before we do this. To cover the deficit, I think one really big thing is fundraising. I think historically the VP of Finance tells certain student groups to fundraise and doesn't tell other student groups to fundraise, and then also doesn't provide information on how to fundraise. So that's something that I really like to do. Another big thing, which I talked about briefly before, is allowing students to prioritize their budgets. I think by using technology with this, we can identify possible collaborations and save money that way. And we also can allow students to feel like they're maxing out with their budget because they are prioritizing it. Additionally, I want to look at historical costs and use technology to be able to measure increases for historical costs so that we can cut on a percentage-based system rather than at the end of each meeting, which is how it's done currently.
Perfect. Pooja, would you like any more time?
Yeah, so another thing with if the student activity fee does not increase, I think it's really important to actually communicate with the CSOs on why budget cuts have taken place. Because again, we are chartering 5 to 10 new CSOs, so cuts will have to happen. But I think making sure that we are explaining to CSOs why those are happening and how they can improve, as well as, like Leah said, various means of fundraising and other resources on campus, such as departments.
Perfect. Amanda, would you like 30 more seconds, or?
Yeah, I'm just going to explain one more thing.
Perfect.
So another potential I see here for technology is things like card scanners, just to take attendance at events. Currently, we do have a flagging system in place, but I think we could really lay down some concrete measurements to say, oh, this club has actually grown 200% over the past year. This is why their budget is doubling. Or to say, hey, this event had 20% of the attendance it was supposed to. And to really be able to measure that rather than take, kind of a qualitative look at it. So that's something that I plan on doing and plan on formalizing even more, just to help with the budget process and to make those cuts even more fair.
Perfect, thank you. We have one more question.
Okay, so the last question is, how do you plan on protecting smaller CSOs?
So in the possible budget crunch, usually the larger CSOs might take priority over the smaller ones. And we had a question in our online forum from a smaller CSO asking how they might be protected under that instead of getting like SAB's budget cut.
Am I starting?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, cool, sorry. So, yeah, I think this is by percentage comes into play. So I'm just a little bit. So the first thing the Finance Committee does is it takes the request and it says, does this meet the directives? We say yes or no. No, then it's thrown out. Yes, then we determine if we have enough money to fund it. The problem is every year we have a bunch of things that meet the rules, but we don't have enough money to fund it. And the process for putting things down isn't formalized. I think that to help grow, we can redefine historical costs and then be able to cut at the end of the entire process by percentage so that cuts are felt evenly across groups and not towards certain groups. In my experience with the Finance Committee, I definitely see how smaller clubs and smaller groups, or even just newer groups, really were inhibited with growth because of historical costs and the way that that's defined, and lack of adequate measurement to be able to show adequate growth. That's something that I find.
Perfect. Pooja?
So in terms of smaller groups, I typically think about our new CSOs and our CSOs that are smaller groups of students, and that doesn't mean they're any less important. And so I think that by increasing communication to those student groups and hearing their needs and making sure that we're able to best fit those needs based on how much funds we have. Our funds are endless, unfortunately, and I think that by communicating and actually getting to know those CSOs and talking to all CSOs across the board, we can make cuts that best fit them. So being able to tell which parts of their funding is essential to their success as a CSO.
Perfect. Amanda, would you like 30 more seconds to speak on this issue?
Yeah, just one last thing. I think another thing that would be very helpful to new CSOs is more readable formats in the finance process. I think for new CSOs, it's very intimidating to just go into the finance process not really knowing anything. So Pooja mentioned this earlier, just improving funding buddies is huge, but then also making things like workshops a time to actually do your budget, or making videos of how to put a budget together. Things like that I think are very helpful to newer, smaller groups so that they're not cheated by the finance process, so to speak.
Perfect. Pooja?
So I would be also wanting to work with the Committee for Student Organizations and making sure that in the new charter process, we're working with CSOs, so along the way of becoming chartered, they're also learning about the funding process. And in those meetings that they have with the ComSo meeting, committee members, we're able to bring our finance members into there as well. So that way, along with the process, they're able to know how they get funds to do things.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so that's all the questions from the commission. Are there any questions from the audience to either VP of Finance candidate? No? All right, well, thank you for coming out tonight, candidates. Oh, we do have one again. All right.
So this question goes out to Amanda. I just want to know, you mentioned that you would make historical changes to, as your position as VP of Finance. Can you just elaborate on what those are and what those entail and how you would tackle that?
Yeah, so right now we use historical costs as a baseline. So say a club receives like $1,000 in a year. We say that's their historical cost. And historical costs can change if they grow or if they shrink, but we don't necessarily measure that. So I don't necessarily want to change that we evaluate historical cost. I just want to change the way we evaluate how historical cost changes, which is a little bit confusing. But I want to measure more effectively how clubs are growing or shrinking, and then be able to apply that to the historical cost principle. I think a lot of times it's done without actual evidence of what's taken place in the club. So I think it's really important to measure that and then pass it down through the finance committee so that there are tools for that.
Pooja, do you want to talk any about historical cost?
Yeah, so all CSOs function out of the Student Involvement Center. And they have to go to the Student Involvement Center in order to make any purchases for their CSO or to go get money back if they made their own purchases on their own dollar. So those are all tracked through the CSO, and I want to be able to use that information that's been collected in order to see
oh wait, you spent this much money this year, but you're still requesting like more, the amount that you did, but you only used half of that. So I want to be able to use that data as well.
Perfect, thank you. Amanda, you do get 30 more seconds if you'd like on this. If not, you can always pass as well.
No, I'm okay, thanks.
Perfect. Sam? All right. Any more questions from the audience? All right. Yes, thank you for coming out tonight. Everybody give Amanda a big round of applause for doing well, and please go for coming out as well. And next up, we have the VP of Internal Affairs, which we have one candidate for. Unless we have any potential write-in candidates in the audience who would also like to run against it. No? All right.
I'm okay with that. I'm totally fine with that. So hello everyone, my name is Chandler Beck. I'm a current sophomore here at SLU, studying public health. Right now in SGA, I am a senator along with Mr. Clark right here in the College for Public Health and Social Justice. I'm also chairing, along with Malia and now Pooja, this semester, the Student Outreach Committee. So the guy that sends out the mailers and spams your inboxes, that's me. I'm sorry about that. But yeah, a little bit about my position. The prior candidates have already talked about a little bit about this, about communication with the student body. That's basically the key part of my component, my position. If our communication is not clear and effective enough, it's not going to work at all. So that's something that I've already taken on within student outreach specifically. So making our agendas look a lot, not as scary. We're seating a new senator, not a 20-word sentence about why we're doing this. Basically making every communication effort also look clean and professional as well. So yeah, one of our other main goals as well, we've been refining our SGA brand as well. So our new motto that we rolled out this year is a resource and a voice for all SLU students. As I've been going around to different CSOs, I've really noticed that no one really knows that. So yeah, we're going to have to keep continuing those outreach efforts and really make sure that we're able to accomplish that goal of achieving our motto. So yeah.
Perfect. We do have a couple questions for you, just to make sure you're qualified. And Ramon will take those away.
What ways does SGA currently foster transparency in the organization, committees, and CSOs, and how do you plan on increasing this transparency in the future?
Yeah, of course, thank you for that. So yeah, transparency, it's kind of a big thing, especially for this current administration. But yeah, we've been really looking at how to really figure out how to really communicate what's happening within SGA. So we got a lot of feedback saying, hey, the minutes, they don't really reveal much about each meeting. So yeah, one, we implemented a live stream. So it allows for people that don't want to sit awkwardly in the back of the Senate chambers to just watch it in the comfort of their own home. So we're looking, right now it's filmed on my old cell phone, we're looking on putting it an actual camera and microphone within the Senate chambers with that. So that's one of the biggest ways that we can try to increase transparency with that. Also, in terms of social media, we're trying to expand more into different platforms. So basically, you see SGA everywhere, whether you're just scrolling on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, things like that. So.
I guess we're moving on. So one of your responsibilities is to chair the Senate in absence of the president. Do you have any experience running organizations?
Yeah, I've had actually quite a bit of training within parliamentary procedure from high school. I was involved in a few organizations back there. So I know Robert's rules quite a bit, actually. So yeah.
So we'll just move on again. So a big part of your role as VP of IA is maintaining the internal organization of SLU, of SGA. What ways do you organize your own life, and how do you plan on organizing SGA?
Yeah, so organization has to be a big part of my job. Basically, if SGA is not organized, it doesn't work. So yeah, basically using Google Drive to its fullest extent. So right now, all of our committees have different subfolders within our team drive, except every committee, including my own, does not utilize the actual SGA team drive. So being able to have all of that under one, so if a student comes and asks like, hey, what is the Student Outreach Committee doing? They can come directly, email us at sga@slu.edu. I can figure it out for them from there. So making sure that we're using electronic resources efficiently and also using them correctly. So that means digitalizing archives, making sure that everything is maintained and published almost immediately from Senate meetings are available online.
Alrighty, and that's all the questions that the commission has for the VP of Internal Affairs. Are there any questions from the audience for the VP of Internal Affairs? I'm going to pause pretty long this time because I've been interrupted twice. All right, perfect. Well, thank you for coming outside, Chandler. And next up, we have diversity and inclusion, and we have 3 candidates actually. So you guys are gonna have to share mics. We have George, Jamar, and Nina, correct? Yes.
So we'll just go in alphabetical order for introduction. So Nina, you can go first.
Hi, my name is Nina Forgy, and I'm a junior studying biomedical engineering. Some positions that I've held, or like I'm holding right now, I'm the president of ASA. I'm also the vice president of the National Society of Black Engineers. I'm also the historian of the Korean Student Association, and I also work a lot with ISF and Alice Week. Some of the things that I want to push forward as if I get this position in SGA is working towards a mentorship program. So I don't want only people in this community to feel comfortable. I want the outer community as well in St. Louis to also feel comfortable once they get onto this campus. So a way I'm thinking of doing that is by creating a mentorship program. And that mentorship program looks like us, the students, going out to neighborhood high schools and talking to them about college, talking to them about how St. Louis is, how it's very possible for them to also get an education here and in college in general. So working that way. I also want to work with DLC, working towards making a unified leadership within the DLC, and also making sure that it will be a place where we can talk and discuss our identities, and also be a place where we can problem solve any problems that we have towards that.
Jamar did not make it tonight, so George, you can go next.
Yeah, can everybody hear me? Okay, cool. So my name is George Tharp. I use they, them pronouns. I am a junior here at SLU in the College for Public Health and Social Justice. Shout out to Chandler Beck. I have been involved in SGA since my freshman year. I've been a senator first for the College for Arts and Sciences, and this most recent year in the College for Public Health and Social Justice. In that time, I have been involved with the Diversity Leadership Cabinet, kind of ad hoc, never really a part of it because I'm not a DLC senator, so I can't necessarily sit on that committee. However, I always do my best to go to those meetings and make sure if there are any questions that I can answer from the senatorial position, that I can do that. Something that I'm working with my team on and something that I'm running on is the idea of being honest and being honest more with ourselves and the language that we use. So in order to do that, I kind of understand that it's kind of difficult for me to come up here during one debate and have people kind of like trust me based on just a couple minutes of talking. So I'm going to do the best I can to, in the time I've left, I always run out of time in Senate, so I'm not sure how I'm doing, but I'm going to do the best to kind of be as vulnerable as I can. My time at SLU has not been the prettiest at times. My freshman year, my first semester, I was raped by somebody in my own fraternity, and that has come with a lot of mental disabilities.
That is all your time.
Oh, okay.
We'll come back to it though. So you actually have the first question.
Oh, perfect.
Yes. If you could just talk a little bit about what diversity and inclusion means to you, and like what you would like to see on campus as far as diversity.
Absolutely. So I'm very fortunate to go to St. Louis University. And in that, my education, I focus on public health, women's and gender studies, African American studies, and then to kind of tie those all together, I also study English. Also because I just love picking up new minors, apparently. But in that, I've done a lot of time of reflection on what those words mean, right? What does diversity mean? What does inclusion mean? And what do they mean together, more importantly? And I think that's a conversation that we as a university need to have in order to kind of continue to grow. There have been recently a lot of things happening in the St. Louis community more broadly that have kind of translated onto campus and have translated to different tensions on campus. And I think the way we can kind of navigate that, I don't know if anybody's familiar with bell hooks, but bell hooks is a feminist scholar, and one of her major texts is all about love. And I think one of the key things I take away from that, and I've taken away from that text and studying it, is that through diversity and inclusion, we need to learn how to love everybody unconditionally, even when it's hard. Because that's one of the hardest things about love is loving everyone.
All right, thank you. Any response?
So going off of what you said, so for me, coming to SLU, it didn't seem that diverse when I came here. But the thing is about SLU and what I want it to look like is that like each of us accepting our identities, each of us knowing like this is who I am and being comfortable in the environment in which we are, and also being able to be, being comfortable in that environment, but also being able to go up to other people and also like learn from them as well, and also being able to find that space where we can all come together and unify in our differences, but also in our similarities as well.
Thank you. George, you have 30 seconds to respond if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything you said was spot on, right? I'm thinking of another feminist scholar, that's often what I do, but Kimberly Crenshaw, who's kind of the founder of intersectional feminism. But I'm going to butcher this, but what she says is the problem with identity politics is not that we separate groups and we separate identities, but it's that we forget to keep in mind how those separations interact with each other, and how we as full holistic people, not just one identity versus the other, interact with each other. And I think that's something really important also with keeping in mind with this position and kind of the integration with it.
Thank you. You have 30 seconds as well.
Okay.
All right. Next question. This goes to you first, Nina. Could you please describe your experiences advocating for students of all identities on campus, and how that will help you as Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion?
So, being a part of many different CSOs, such as KSA, the Korean Student Association, and ISF, which is the International Student Federation, I'm able to sort of see the differences in those identities, but also being able to connect them as well. So also understanding that, like, yes, we are different, but also that we share a lot of similarities, and that we shouldn't be afraid to go out to other people and go out and experience different cultures, different identities. And, I'm sorry, did I answer the question?
If you feel like you did, yeah. George, you have 1 minute?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So just if you could touch on your experiences advocating for different identities on campus, and how that will help you as Vice President.
Perfect. I appreciate that. I have a terrible memory, so this is going to happen several more times. So in my experience at St. Louis University, being a person of the trans plus community, also being in who I am through my scholarship through Women's and Gender Studies and African American Studies, and then also being a survivor of sexual violence on this campus specifically, I've been able to be very, very fortunate to be in conversations and to be in rooms where advocacy is happening, as well as being a student activist, self-identifying, right, myself as a student activist on campus, and really doing everything I can and using the idea of radical love, like we talked about earlier, to advocate for every single student, because at the end of the day, we are all so beautiful, we are all so vibrant, we're all so different, and that difference is what makes us who we are. So I really, whenever I do my activist work, or whenever I do my advocacy work, whether that be through the founding of an organization that empowers survivors of sexual violence specifically, or working in Senate to try to make sure everything is as equitable and as justice-driven as possible, I really try to take all those into consideration.
Sure. Would you like to respond?
Yeah, so just going off of that, also, in order to be an advocate, you also have to be willing to listen, and to listen to the different voices that you are being approached by. So being that listening, being that person to listen, and also take those voices and bring them to the places where they should be heard, is a responsibility that I would like to take, like while being the VP of Diversity and Inclusion. So yes.
George, you have response as well.
Yeah. Amen. I mean, pass, I guess. I think, actually, I take it back. I just think I don't know, I think everything you said is perfect, so I'm just going to pass it. You're right.
So,
I'm going to start calculating.
George, this question goes to you first this time.
Love it.
You guys both mentioned a lot of things you want to do in your opening statements, but if you could just say your biggest priority if you're elected next year, what would it be?
That's tough. I think building on existing frameworks. I think that's probably my number one priority. I think keeping in mind that that this is a one-year position and that there's only so much that can be done. And I think taking small steps is often the most sustainable practice. And I think certain groups that we do have, so the return of ASAP or SAPA, depending on what generation of SGA you're from, and then also the slow return of DLC, because DLC also took a kind of a pause from campus. But really working on those groups, and I think past VPs and current VPs are doing fabulous jobs of ensuring those groups are as validated as possible. But I still think there's a lot of room for improvement when it comes to working to validate those groups, whether that looks like making DLC another voting body to match Senate, to kind of act as another kind of check and balance within SGA itself, to even working with ASAP to have a stronger role when it comes to either communications through the Title IX office or just functions through the Title IX office or other survivor support systems in general.
Ina?
So going off of what George said about taking baby steps, so one of the steps that I would want to plan is like I mentioned before, is the mentorship program. It seems like a very small thing, but at the end it can become a big thing, because coming onto this campus, sometimes you don't get to see a face like yourself. Like, I'm Black, I don't get to see that many people that are Black in my classes. So going to those schools and showing them here I am, here I'm getting my education, and you can as well, is so uplifting. And I think that's a really important step into making SLU a more diversified campus, just showing yourself and showing that you care about the outer community as well. And also working and building on the frameworks, like working with the clock tower accords, making sure those accords get pushed, making sure that the higher ups hear us and realize that it's very important that these things be passed.
George, would you like to respond?
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. And I think kind of going off some of the frameworks that Nina's using, and using some systems that we already have at SLU, right? So for those of you like myself who were fortunate to know the late Dr. Norm White in his formation of the Overground Railroad system, which has that mentorship program capacity. And I think empowering the Department of Criminal Justice within the College for Public Health and Social Justice to do that work more fluently, I think is an incredible step that we can advocate for through this position, whoever is lucky enough to have that.
Would you like to respond?
And also, I'm a real big person about collaborating, sometimes two heads is better than one. So going out, reaching out to the other SGAs as well, and also talking to them and how we can further build the St. Louis community as well, as, for example, DACA, trying to probably push so that St. Louis can become a sanctuary city, which in turn will make our campus a sanctuary city as well. So collaborating for a bigger end goal.
Thank you. So last question from us. Earlier this year, the Senate voted to establish a committee to determine the future of the oath of inclusion. If you could just talk about your views on the oath and how would you like to see it used in the future? I think it goes to Nina first.
So the oath, to me, when I first heard the oath, I thought it was a beautiful thing. I was like, wow, this is such a great standard to have and to hold for a university. Has that happened? Not really, but that's okay, because I think that with the oath, it's a standard that we should reach, and I know that it's been suspended. I would like to see it come back, but I would like us to keep each other accountable. And what accountability looks like for me is if this sort of situation happens where someone breaks the oath, that some type of punishment is for that action. Because even though speech may seem free, sometimes the stuff that we say can have consequences. And so sort of understanding that, once we get into the real world, that certain things that we do will have consequences, is sort of keeping ourselves in check as well, and making sure that we're well-rounded students and individuals for the future.
Thank you. George?
Yeah, Yeah, so this is a kind of, I guess, a loaded question, but when I was a senator for the College for Arts and Sciences, I was actually one of the 3 senators who suspended the oath of inclusion, and I'll kind of give a pitch why. So I'm all about being honest, right, and seeing words and meaning words, not just saying words and not just having words on a piece of paper to make people feel better. Myself included, the oath of inclusion was used as a marketing tool for me to come to SLU. However, within the first few days of being on SLU's campus, I was called many slurs, including the word faggot, which hurts if you're a queer person, and you hear that word, and it's very hard for me to say it. I'm kind of shaking in the moment, but Noelle, Tommy, and I really took a hard look at what is happening on campus and what is the oath of inclusion. And through conversations and through bringing in other voices to the table, we were able to kind of make the action plan of this is something that we want to do. What I want to do with the oath of inclusion, I think the oath of inclusion in full, I think is a cool idea. However, I think it's near impossible to implement that fully. So what I would like to do instead is use the framework and use the same verbiage that is used in the oath of inclusion. However, craft that into some kind of new document that uses that same context, but instead of something to punish students for not following, something to empower students and something to protect students through various ways. I see your mic coming up. I'm sorry.
We'll give you 30 seconds in a little bit. Anita, you want to respond?
No, I give my 30 seconds.
All right. Gene, continue.
Yeah, so kind of building off of that too, so there's a lot of protections that I think students, and I think with protections too, we have to keep an open mind, an open framework. So I currently sit on the committee that's kind of investigating what to do with the oath of inclusion, so I'm very privileged to be in these conversations. But something we're kind of looking into is how do we use this document through different departments that are on campus, through administrators. And what we're trying to do is set up a framework with the Office of Conduct and Community Standards to have a third branch of SGA, or a second branch of SGA. Well, I guess that's a third branch, right? Because we have executive, legislative, and then hopefully judiciary branch. So something that could help uphold the rights of students that are enforced through a Bill of Rights or something.
All right, thank you for your responses. That's all that we have. If we have any questions from the audience.
Hi. Oh, this is loud. I could just get over this one. It's unnecessary, but okay. I think everyone here enjoys the idea of collaboration. However, if you don't know, I am the president of Rainbow Alliance, aka a multicultural org. We find that frequently within other CSOs and multicultural orgs that we feel unwanted. So just in trying to make, or not make, but have orgs collaborate, how would you all make sure that it is a, welcoming space that, is a space for everyone?
Okay, hi. I first want to say I'm sorry that you guys feel that way. I don't think anybody should feel ostracized on campus, especially based off of a certain identity. I think that's an atrocity, and I think that's something that we can hopefully work on together. As far as collaborations go, I think that there's a lot of things that this position can do, and that this position is working for with the groundwork laid by past VPs and the current VP to increase collaboration with the Cross-Cultural Center and other support systems for those multicultural CSOs like Rainbow Alliance. In the past couple of years, we've kind of, and you know this too, we've kind of been going through a weird phase with advisors for multicultural CSOs, as well as the movement of CSOs from Cross-Cultural Center to the SIC, and then I'm not sure if we have a position in the SIC currently to advise CSOs, so we're kind of floating again. So really working with the Student Involvement Center, working with the administration to make sure there's solidified frameworks so that CSOs never have to go through through that lack of representation process on the administrative side. I think like through that, is it time? Okay.
So going off of what you're saying, I want the CSOs to be comfortable, especially if they're being like collaborating with other people. It would be weird to have a situation where you're not comfortable with other people you're collaborating. So I think that starts with leadership, and that's why I want to work with DLC in making sure that we are all at the same page as leaders, and so that when we get to a situation where we all have to collaborate, that everyone is like holding themselves accountable, making sure that like, oh, like if this person comes into my space, that they're comfortable because I've already formed that bond with you through DLC. So yes.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think validating DLC is like an excellent way to address that. To again finish what I was saying, I think like a part of that also is making sure like on the staff side we have representation, right? So that was kind of the thought I was finishing. I think it's kind of awkward that certain student groups, the larger student groups, have their own graduate representatives and graduate assistants whose main job and who get full tuition just to work with those groups. However, there's not that framework when it comes to multicultural organizations. And I do think we need more representation when it comes to that aid up above.
Any more questions from the audience?
Hey, okay. This is kind of more of a question for George. So Nina kind of mentioned how she had a program of mentorship kind of that she wanted to work on, which is something that could have a huge future impact on SLU. I was kind of wondering if you have like some type of plan or like specific like kind of thing you want to get to that's kind of not like working with like the oath, because the oath is something that, as we've seen so far, isn't kind of doing anything. So I'm wondering if you have any plans kind of like that.
Yeah, so I think that's an awesome question. I think keeping in mind that this position is only a year long, I think kind of limits what I can do, because there's a lot of things that I would love to do, right? And there's a lot of systems and a lot of programs that would be awesome at St. Louis University. However, the best that I can do in that is laying down the foundations. You're only a junior, right? So Nina's only a junior, so she's a longer time at SLU to kind of work on that stuff. And my time at SLU hopefully is only a year longer. We'll see if I can graduate in time or not. But I think something that I'm working on besides the oath, right? Because the oath I don't think should fall solely under the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion, because I think that's kind of also tokenizing the oath in a way. I think another thing that I kind of want to focus on is collaborating with every single position on the executive board, right? Because I think it would also be very foolish to assume that the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion is its own lane. Because I think diversity and inclusion, in order for it to be successful at least, needs to be inherent in every single position, right? I think Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion has stake in Vice President of Academic Affairs, has stake in Internal Affairs, has stake in student organizations, has stake in finance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think something that I'm really focusing on, and I think my TIC is really focusing on too, is making sure we're working off of existing frameworks and making those frameworks as successful as possible.
Wait, did you ask the question towards me too?
You can respond.
You can talk more about your mentorship program if you'd like, or just take the minute, or you don't have to. Either way, we just offer it.
I'm good.
George, do you want to continue?
Yeah. So something that I want to see happen next year. So this is answering your question more directly. It kind of builds off of those working with other vice president positions, and it's something that Tony and I have been talking a lot about. But it's incorporating more accessible frameworks in already existing programs for students. So the Student Success Center, for example. As someone who has a trans plus identity, as well as being mentally disabled, through different PTSDs, through anxiety, through depression, through panic disorder, just to make that kind of more known. But so something we're working on is making those systems within those offices more accessible for people like me and more people who are othered by, he's counting down, or who are othered by some kind of identity.
This question goes out to both of the individuals standing up there. As diversity and inclusion VP, what will you be doing to represent students of color here in the classroom, outside of the classroom, in the community, and those outside of the community that would be possibly potential militants here? And how will you represent the minorities on this campus when we've been neglected for my entire time here. Our voice is not recognized in the classroom. It is harder for us to succeed in the classroom and to be taken seriously. So although your position could be very social in that regard, it also transcends into the classroom. So I'd just like to see for both viewpoints what you both can do for that.
Nina, we'll go to you first.
Thank you for that question. I really do feel your sentiment as well because, like I said, being probably the only Black person in my engineering classes is sometimes really hard to discuss problems with identity, and especially when the shooting happened, it was really hard for me to even focus. And we're over here learning about circuits. So, so going off of that, I would like to see, and I'm pretty sure it probably could be possible, a way for the teachers at least to take at least 30 seconds of their time to sort of discuss the situation, or at least to be able to provide resources and say, oh, here's what happened, here's a resource if you want to be able to talk about it, here's the various places you can go to. Because if they can talk about I don't know, spaceships going up into space, they can also have 30 seconds to talk about, issues that are going on in the greater St. Louis community and be able to advocate and say, there's probably people here that are feeling very down, and here's the resources that you can take. And I think those 30 seconds or 60 seconds are very important to acknowledge that the fact that you do know that this is happening and you recognize it and you care about the students and how they're feeling in that environment.
Thank you, George.
So quite obviously, I'm not a person of color, so it would be irresponsible for me to advocate, not to advocate, but to push for change in that avenue. However, what I would focus on is using the resources that I have available, such as my DLC co-chair, whoever that may be in the future, and using relationships with other people as well as administrators to try to create the best frameworks possible for that, and working through the Dean of Students office in order to create frameworks that overlap different departments or different divisions, right? So having something kind of a merger between student development and in the provost office, so that we have a framework for not only helping to represent students who have marginalized identities in classrooms, and Tony can talk about more of this later, this is something that she's really passionate about also, but having a framework for students who feel uncomfortable in classrooms to also have a place and to go to say that they're feeling uncomfortable, and then have something to kind of counteract that and work with them so they're not penalized.
Yeah, and also going off of your question about how will you make sure that the minorities will feel more comfortable, I also even though if I do get this position, I'll be in that higher up stage, I want to still meet the students at the level, because we're all students at the end of the day, and we're all minorities, and so I want to be able to make sure that in my position that the voices are getting heard. So you guys are the eyes and the ears, right? And I'm the recorder of the voices. So I want to be able to take those voices to where they belong, to the higher ups, when issues such as, discrimination and racism and sexism and all sorts of things happen, that they're getting heard to the higher people, and also bringing those people into the room, because it's not just me that can do everything, but it's also you guys. And like I said, two heads are better than one, and making sure that all of us are up there where we are supposed to be is very important to me. So yeah.
Thank you, George.
I think that's absolutely correct.
All right. Any more questions?
We have one more.
It's me again. Hey. So you both mentioned accountability earlier, and I think that's great. My only thing with that is, I know from personal experience with having friends in the office and stuff, and reading the sexual misconduct policy, that literally for any infraction on campus, whether it be sexual assault or smoking pot in the dorm room, there is no standard of punishment. It goes all on a case-by-case basis. So while you're wanting accountability, I just have concerns that that's a great idea, but with how the system is set up, you're limited, I think, in So I just want to hear y'all's thoughts.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Like, do you like accountability in like what regard?
So you all were specifically talking about the oath and when people violate the oath.
Sure.
And I know you, George, specifically were talking about a judiciary branch of SGA, and like I said, there's just like no minimums or standards for punishment, I guess, or accountability.
I think I'm answering it. So within that judiciary branch, that's kind of a large, kind of like in the cloud idea at the moment. But I think something that comes along with that is not only having like a panel of students who are like the judiciary, but also having student advocates. Because in the system that we currently have at St. Louis University in conduct cases and in cases regarding Title IX and other conduct violations and anything related to that and any kind of infraction, there's not allowed student representation with that student. So if you're fortunate, there are staff members who are care and concern coordinators who can go with you through those processes. But if you don't already have a strong relationship with those staff members, that can be a really uncomfortable setting to be in. While going through the Title IX process for my case, I didn't have anybody to necessarily go to. And that's kind of contributed to a lot of mental disabilities as well. So I think that having someone, whether it be someone's RA, I think RAs are great resources for first and second year students, or even having some other close personal connection with a student to walk with you through those processes and to have a support system when in those meetings. I think that not only helps state of mind for people going through those processes, but I think it also will, in the long term, create create a broader system of accountability for those different offices, because there'll be more heads at that table and more people hearing and seeing what's going on.
Going off of what George was saying about making sure that students are there during these discussions and conduct and stuff like that is very important, because we want the students that are going through these situations to be comfortable. And I know you're more comfortable when it's a student and not like an adult staring at you and probably judging you. So we want to be able to make sure that students are able to be a part of this this process, and then this process of sort of making sure that like it's fair, like that accountability is being fair, and that we're holding ourselves to a standard as well.
Yeah, I think just to kind of continue what I was saying, and I think like through that process, I think, and not only in those processes, but also in this position, I think it's so important to keep a lens of equity and justice, not just diversity and inclusion, as opposed to that rather. So keeping in mind what is equal and what is fair for all students, no matter where people start, right? So I think that often, I know, right, that people with marginalized identities don't necessarily start at the starting line. We often fall way behind, or sometimes like not even on the same track. So it's really important, I think, in those processes and in everything that this position does to keep an equity and justice lens in mind, not only with conduct cases, not only with, conduct, because like this position doesn't really have to deal with conduct, but which is like fortunate, because that's above my pay grade. But yeah, sorry, I'm out of time.
Any more questions from the audience?
All right. Thank you, candidates, for your time. I know there's a lot of questions. And now we'll be moving on to the VPs of International Affairs, Angela and Sergio.
You guys can introduce yourselves. Angela, go first.
Hi, my name is Angela Gomez. I'm majoring in social work, political science, and international studies. I'm currently the vice president of International Student Federation. I'm also an international ambassador, and last year I worked with the Committee of International Affairs in the SGA. So there's several things I want to do in order to improve the life of international students here at SLU. So first, scholarships. For the current students, we don't have a lot of scholarship opportunities because we don't have FAFSA, we're not US citizens, so I want to make sure that we can actually improve that. I also want to create a new scholarship that will basically involve the incoming students because there's a lot of students from other countries who come from low socioeconomic backgrounds who really want to study in the US, but they don't have the resources for it. So I would like to definitely be the voice for them, because seriously, graduating from with an American degree is a privilege, and I want to make sure they also have a voice for that. I also want to work to increase the opportunities for employment and internship, because as international students, since we don't have FAFSA and US citizenship, there's basically a lot of jobs that we cannot even apply to, and we can only work on campus. And I also want to increase the internship opportunities, because as I said before, we don't have a lot of opportunities because we're not US citizenship. We don't have US citizenship, so I will definitely work closely with career services. And lastly, I will want to focus continually with housing and rest life, because a lot of international students don't feel comfortable in their first and second year when they come to SLU, because they're with students that don't like learning about their culture and stuff like that. So I would definitely want to continue improving that so that they feel more comfortable in this university when they come here.
All right, now for a second.
Hello everyone, my name is Sergio Bernabeu. I'm from Madrid, Spain. I studied in SLU Madrid before coming here. I was there for 1.5 years. During that time, I was a campus ambassador, and I got really involved with the SGA, even though I was never officially part of it. When I'm both there and when I got here, there's been so many people and so many staff members that have helped me out in one way or another, that I want to give back I want to give back to SLU for what they've done for me, and that's why I'm running for SGA. Some of the things that I want to focus on are also, as Angela said, scholarships for international students. We really do not have that many opportunities. Just for not being American, we don't get to apply for FAFSA, so that always takes up most of them, so I also want to work on that. And one of the other main focuses of my program for next year is the study abroad program. We have an amazing campus in Madrid. We have so many other programs available all over the globe, and they're not always easiest to access. You may get the course pre-approved, and then you go, you take it, and when you get back, they don't accept it for your curriculum, as, for example, happened to my friend Lucia. Or to begin with, they just won't offer that class anymore, so I want to work with that. I want to make sure that for whomever wants to go study abroad, that process, that experience will be as smooth as possible, at least academically.
All right then, well, thank you. And so for the first question, we'll start with Sergio. What is an experience you had as an international student that you wish to change so that future students don't have to experience it?
Can you say that again? Sorry.
What is something when you were an international student happened that you wish that future international students don't have to experience?
I would say it would be the whole mix of the first month here. So for me, it was relatively easier because I've met quite a lot of people that have studied abroad in Madrid, and they're from here. So when I came here, I knew people that could show me around, tell me where to go to get anything, because everything changes, even the small details of your day-to-day life change, and it is really useful to have someone there to be like, oh, you just have to go here or do this instead. And the international ambassadors do an amazing job at it, but that is mostly on the context of getting used to SLU, to how the university works, the educational system, not about how everything else works in the US.
Okay, so there's two main things I would like to definitely change. First is employment. Like seriously, it's really hard to get an employment for your international students because most of them are just for their work studies. And in some even applications say that they apply, anyone can apply, but in the end says we really prefer for their work studies. So that's definitely I would like to change to increase the opportunities. Also, a lot of international students when they come to the US in general don't know anything about health insurance, and it's really an issue. So the majority don't even have a health insurance because they don't know how it works, because including myself, I come from a country that has universal health insurance, so coming here, we don't understand how it works and stuff like that, so definitely want to promote like a session and stuff like that about health insurance, so that work one-on-one with them, so that we can make sure that they actually are protected with health insurance and they do understand what's better for them.
Do you want to respond?
Yes. First of all, and to touch on the health insurance part, it is the same for me. I come from a country where we have universal health insurance, so we don't really need to worry about it. But when we come here, during orientation, they do talk about it. We just never actually ask questions about it, and we just ignore it until something happens. And, well, yeah, that.
Okay. Next question. What are some goals you hope to achieve as Vice President International?
Well, yeah, definitely what I talk about. First, scholarships. As current students, we cannot, like I said before, we cannot apply to a lot of scholarships because we don't have U.S. citizenship, we don't have FAFSA and stuff like that. So I want to make sure we have more opportunities to apply to, because even though when we apply to a U.S. college, we need to show that we can pay for the first year. After that, we aspire to, have a little bit of help depending on our GPA and involvement and stuff like that, but we cannot even apply to that. So I want to make sure that students have that. And also, like I said, when it comes to scholarships, I want to create that new scholarship so that, because this is something that our university is starting to do here in the U.S., that they have created a new scholarship that only for incoming students, that without it, otherwise will not be able to pay, not even the first year. So I want to make sure that those people also have a voice in order to apply to SLU, and in that way we can also amplify the diversity, because most students here comes from Asia because they have more resources to pay for university. There's not a lot for Latinos and stuff like that because we don't have the resources for that. So I want to make sure there's more possibilities for other students.
Can you repeat the question?
What goals do you hope to achieve as Vice President International?
So one of my main goals that I haven't mentioned is to chip away this little bubble. So not only the bubble itself between St. Louis University and the community around it, but also the communities within SLU. We have that huge SLU bubble that we're all part from, but at the same time we have smaller ones like the fraternities, the sororities, some small international communities, and some not so small ones. And even some colleges like Parks, the med school, the law school, the Madrid campus itself, even though to be fair, they are far. So I want to work on that, because we don't really get a chance to all mix together, maybe except the really big events like the Atlas Week or the International Education Week. So I want to give to whomever wants that opportunity of mixing together and creating an actual community within SLU.
Anna, you want to respond?
Yes. Going on from that, I also want to improve when it comes to race life, is that when international students come to SLU the first year, they stay in a dorm, as we always know, but sometimes they don't feel welcome, they feel like isolated and marginalized. Some even prefer to rent another apartment outside and pay both. So it's been really an issue, so I want to make sure that we also can improve that by integrating domestic students and international students, especially domestic students who are really open and willing to help international students as well, and to interact with them. So that's something I really want to push for, because when I was in the first year, I was in DGC, Diversity and Global Citizenship Learning Community, and that's over.
So following up on what she said about the housing community for international students, we do have the InterSchool program, which does not really include most of the international students. And we've been talking about for God knows how many years about having an international housing community. And the good thing is it has been approved. It is happening. It's not exactly what we wanted, but baby steps. But it has been approved. It will be happening next year. And even though it's still on the organization stages, so there's a lot to be done, but it will be happening, and we really want to work on it so that it offers a housing opportunity, not only for incoming freshmen.
So how will you support international students of different international backgrounds than your own?
So not being from here, obviously, same as any other international students, I have that experience of coming from abroad, of living in a place where I had no idea about anything. So there are two things I want to do. First of all, try to step out of my own shoes and see everything from their own perspective, try to understand it, and try to help them out from there. And then, knowing about all the international and multicultural CSOs on campus, try to maybe tell them, like, there's this community that maybe you'll fit right in. Like, we have so many CSOs that there's no way that every student can know everything about all of them. So, and that's what we're here for. We're here to tell them, like, hey, you have all these things that you could try. You could go meet these new people, see if it's a community that you want to belong with and you feel like you belong with.
So in general, I consider myself very cultural competent. Not only I have been involved in my own like region, something like that, but also involved in other cultural organizations such as KSA, which is the Korean Association, as well as when I was in DGC, I was involved with other cultures and stuff like that. So definitely, I want to make sure that they feel welcome to start with, because that's when the first like impression when they get to SLU, they want to feel welcome. And when they feel welcome, it will be easier to transition when it comes to being involved in different organizations. The idea of ISF, for example, is trying to get these international students being more involved at SLU itself and also in other type of organizations. So I definitely want to try work with them one-on-one and also understand what do they want to do, what are like their concerns, and that's what I'm doing lately. Also talking about what are their concerns, how they see the things from their own perspective, so we can start improving that.
Sergio? Okay, so the next question is, how do you believe international students are adequately supported at this university?
For me?
Well, right now we have different programs. We have the Into SLU program, for example, that is basically a pathway for international students when they come to SLU. And the idea is to provide, more English classes and stuff like that before they start their major. So that when they start their major, they feel more comfortable with the language and stuff like that. And that's been well. I've heard a lot of concerns about it that we could actually improve. Also, international services focus on, a lot of help for international students, but also, like I said, we still need to improve a lot of when it comes to employment opportunities as well as internships, because I know a lot of international students who apply for some internships, but obviously those internships said that we require, green card at least and stuff like that, so it's been really hard for them to get this experience. And in the end, we're here in the US for a reason. We're here to learn more about and have more experience, because we know the US is still, a really good country when it comes to education. So I want to make sure that every single student has full potential and have this, all the opportunities that they can here at SLU.
What was the question again?
Do you believe international students are adequately supported at the university?
I don't think so. I mean, if we were adequately included in SLU in the community, we wouldn't have any problems with it, and we all would be a big added community. So yes, we have Into SLU, which is very strict because it's for incoming freshmen. You live in a dorm, and most international students come as sophomores, maybe even juniors, or even seniors, as some of my friends. So one of the other things that I want to try to change is that trying to offer that housing opportunity for international students, that they are able to live in a community with people from similar backgrounds in a way, but not necessarily in a dorm, but not necessarily off campus either. And yeah, also employment, yes, it is really hard for us, but it's not necessarily a SLU thing. It's also legal reasons for our visas or for other federal requirements that just don't let us work where we would like to.
Also, yeah, going on from housing, definitely creating that new thing, the idea of that new international things, that it's not only international students. Obviously, the idea is that it's approximately like half domestic and international students from other cultures, in order to create that environment where they feel welcome, and also that they can interact with more domestic students. They can learn from each other different perspectives and worldviews. So that's definitely something that I will definitely try to approach and continue doing, because last year we started doing it. I know that this year the SGA is continuing doing it, but I still think it's important to make it realize and happen.
Next one. So, guess we want to open it to the public now. Yes.
Alright, so just Madrid yet. Do you have like a set plan for how you plan to do that, or any idea on how that's gonna, how you can implement that?
The first step would be, well, to be fair, the Madrid campus is already working on expanding the majors they offer, because right now they only offer 11 majors and 2 graduate programs, so it's not really, there's not that much variety. We're working on an engineering programs in Madrid. We're trying to open it also to nursing students so that they can go abroad, not only for a semester, but maybe for a longer time. And then as to programs everywhere else in the world, it does not necessarily depend on us, but it also depends on the corresponding program, the corresponding university. So the steps would be to talk to the advisors here, see how it works, how the conversation goes on whether a course can be taken abroad or not, and why it sometimes happens that they approve it, and then when you come back, it just doesn't work anymore. And then it would be the advisor's role to look for more programs within their area of interest or whatever programs they take care of, to look for more opportunities abroad for students to be able to go. I hope that answers your question.
Just to say something about it, when it comes to the credits, you need to actually go to the register office. So if we're going to make sure that it transfers, we need to actually talk to the register office, talk with each professor of each course, because that's what I did, because I was the first student to go to Pretoria last year, which didn't happen in the end because it got canceled, but still that's what I did, and I was able to transfer some credits and make sure it did, because there's some specifics not only in the course syllabus but also like in the kind of professor, depending on degree and stuff like that. So if you guys are interested also in studying abroad and stuff like that, there's these things we actually make to ensure that are at work.
All right, we do have another question.
Okay, this is for Angela. So you emphasized the opening up opportunities for international students to have more scholarships, but with scholarships in general just being very limited to even American students, what are your plans for obtaining those funds?
Yeah, sure. So it's obviously it's difficult. SLU right now says that they don't have like the resources and stuff like that, but there's like 2 ways that I think we can accomplish this. First, make sure that the resources that SLU are using are actually using in a good way and efficient way, because sometimes they're spending things that maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should give more priority to scholarships and stuff like that. So we need to look at that. And second, if that doesn't work and stuff like that, we should start looking for someone like a donator or something like that, which is something, for example, what SHU has a lot. They have a lot of donators that specifically donate to specific students, and sometimes they even can donate like full scholarship for the 4 years and stuff like that. So it's something we should start looking at that. If SLU is not able to provide the resources and the financials and stuff like that.
So kind of also what Angela said, talk to the Office of Alumni and Donor Engagement, because they have a list. They know so many people that have studied at SLU or that have an interest on donating to SLU. But there's also more requirements other than talking to them. They also need to be happy with what they see from our side. Some scholarships, for instance, the SGA scholarship that we've been working on this year, it was a longer process to make it happen again, to get the funds all over again, to get people to donate, because they need to see initiative on our side. They need to see that we're willing to make things happen, and to not only just give money to a student for them to study, but to give them something more other than a major.
And we have another question.
So this is kind of for both of you, I guess. You both mentioned about the international housing. So how long has that been in the making, and is there like a timeline on when that will be realized?
So in the making, I wasn't here when it actually when the conversations actually started, because this was years ago. And the current VP of International Affairs was just at a meeting last week. The first, let's call it, official meeting for that housing community. They already drafted it out. They were basing it off the wellness housing community and the wellness linked housing, sorry. And they're going to keep working on it throughout this semester to get it ready for it to actually happen next year. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe applications are live already with the housing contract. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, basically what Sergio says, because he's now in the SGA of International Affairs and I was last year. Last year we started talking and stuff like that. We were thinking maybe of doing an LC of international students, but it didn't work because, for an LC you need like certain courses and stuff like that, so that's why we wanted to make it more open instead of an LC like a thing. So yeah, I mean, it's a long process. Apart from that, we also want to include more RAs that are international, especially that, if we were able to make that an international thing, because there's only like 2, maximum 3 per year, which is really low compared to the amount of people who actually apply as international students. We need to work on that too. Yeah.
To add on top of that, I just want to say that, yes, it's happening, but it's not exactly what we had in mind. It's not exactly what we talked a few weeks ago. So I really hope that whoever gets elected keeps working on it, keeps pushing housing to give us what we think is better for international students, because that's what we're here for. We're here to push their voice up the chain of command all the way to the top so that they hear what we want, other than them doing whatever they think that we want.
More questions from the audience?
All right, we do have one more question.
Hi, I have a question about healthcare insurance. So I know, Sergio, you mentioned that when SLU student, international student come to SLU, they actually talk about healthcare insurance. But I'm the International Student Federation president, and I have received a lot of emails from international students talking about healthcare, because every country, we all have different healthcare rules. When I first came to the United States, I didn't know how to, work with the healthcare, and all of a sudden I was getting all the bills, and I didn't know how it works. And I think that, so you both mentioned about healthcare, but is there a way that you could, fix something to let international students know how healthcare insurance work in the United States, so that many students won't have to pay all of these bills?
Yeah, there's plenty of ways that we could get better at it. And one of the main ones I feel is, yes, they talk about it during orientation, but we don't really listen necessarily, because they cram all this information about how SLU works, how everything here and in this country works in 2, maybe 3 days of sessions. So one back-to-back about academics, about insurance, about culture, etc., that we can't process all of the information at once. So even if they tell us about health insurance and all there is to need, we will not remember all of it. So I feel like we, as the SGA, we should be able to get all the information, everything we need, everything the international students may need to know about health insurance, and put it, for example, on the SGA website, because that's what we want to do. We want to centralize everything that you need to know, not only about that, but about the St. Louis area, about all the things that are going on at SLU, the CSOs and everything, put it all in one place so that we can access it.
Yeah, so like I said before, doing this in international orientation week, it's good, but also, yeah, like Sergio said, people maybe forgot, people maybe didn't understand, because it's always understanding English is not that it's not that easy for international students. So definitely, I was thinking maybe, since each international student has its own advisor and stuff like that, and they don't know, maybe they should work one-on-one with his advisor to make sure that they have a health insurance, and it's the one that they need, because it depends on every person's need and everything. So we need to work on that, and also that in that case that the advisor also like it's more involved in the life of international students, because for example my advisor was never involved, I never met with her or anything, so that's something that we need to fix, because many international students don't even know who's their advisor and stuff like that. So definitely work with that, and including more sessions maybe also during the semesters if they still have more like questions and stuff like that. But working one-on-one I think is the most effective way.
I just want to stress that we should talk to the international office. We should make sure that the advisor that every international student has, knows that, well, more than knows, is aware that for us, this system is completely foreign. Like, we don't know how it works. We don't know what we need in order to properly work through it. Let's put it that way. So, yeah.
All right, well, I actually have a question because I went to SLU for 2 years. How would you better promote and kind of build a connection between both campuses, since we are an international university?
You mean with SLU Madrid?
Yeah, how would you better connect both campuses since they're part of the same school?
Well, I mean, I know that they have their own SGA and everything, so definitely work with that. I mean, there's already a lot of students who want to study abroad there, and they have, like, you know, in the end, since the same classes and everything, they don't have a lot of issues. But definitely, I think that working with the SGA there, in order to provide a clear and transparent communication, I think that's like the most important thing.
So, first of all, I feel like SLU Madrid is kind of like, the relationship is a one-way street, because they get our news link every morning. Well, usually we get it at midnight, because here we get it at 7 a.m. And we always know what's going on at main campus, especially because every big decision that is made here comes to Madrid eventually. But it's not two ways, so I would like to, first of all, stay in touch with their SGA. I know their current SGA. I'll probably know the other one because the permanent body in Madrid is very reduced. And focus on also mixing all the people that are studying abroad in Madrid, both from SLU and from different universities, with the permanent body, because they all tend to do their own thing, do their own plans, but it is the permanent students that know the most about the city, about the country, and they should be the ones they go to asking, like, hey, where should I go? Where should I do this? So I feel like that would be a good way of getting study abroad students to really.
I think that does it for these questions, unless there's anything else in the audience. So I think we're going on to the next one, which is VP of Academic Affairs.
So if we just do some opening statements, for you go first.
Absolutely. Hi, my name is Jordan Glassman. I'm running for VP of Academic Affairs. I'm going to give you a brief history of my experience in SGA. Last year I was a senator. I also served on the Academic Affairs Committee. And this year I'm serving on the Academic Affairs Committee as well. I've been involved with some other committees along the way. I'm running for VP of Academic Affairs because academics have played an instrumental role in my life. I consider the greatest blessing that my mom has given me to be my education and furthermore my Jesuit education. So I carry that with me to the stage tonight, hopefully as your VP of Academic Affairs next year. Some of the things on my platform that I really want to work on are making academic technology more accessible to all students. So that's making students aware of the technology that already exists on campus, as well as expanding the technology that we have to include more things in the future. Also, I want to improve on the readership program that we have here at SLU. Currently, the newspaper gets delivered every day to a couple locations on campus, and I think we can renegotiate those contracts, do a much better job at getting people newspapers that they want, and also providing it to them in a vessel that is most suitable for college students. So that would be mobilizing it. And then finally, and maybe most importantly, the VP of Academic Affairs serves on various committees. And from what I understand, those committees aren't a true representation of the SLU body right now. And I think we need to diversify that, include students of all different backgrounds and identities, so that when we're making big decisions about the core curriculum, or anything else academic related, that we have people of all sorts of different backgrounds representing those communities. Thank you.
Hello, okay. Hi, I'm Antonia Simpson in the College for Public Health and Social Justice. While I do not currently have any experience in SGA, I hold leadership positions elsewhere on campus. I'm currently an RA. I was a SLU 101 leader last summer, and I'm currently an AVP of membership in Alpha Phi Omega, our co-ed service fraternity here on campus. And I've noticed just a lot of gaps within the SLU community with like students and like admin and like students and like professors. And it's kind of like disheartening when like you sit in the classroom and you feel extremely uncomfortable because your professor is saying really things that are super duper racist or super duper sexist or super homophobic, and it makes no sense for you to like sit in class and endure that, whether it be for a semester or a year, and nothing that professor reaches experiences like no form of like reparations. Like I would like to bridge that kind of gap, and that's like something that George mentioned earlier, is that needs to be closed because students are afraid to speak out about their professors because they're afraid that they'll fail a class, which is just not, that should not be the case at all. And I'll talk about other things later.
So the first question, you don't get a response to that. So the first question goes to you, Antonia, and actually the question is about your goals and the things that you hope to achieve as Vice President of Academic Affairs, so maybe if you could just elaborate more on that.
Okay, sure. So this is something I've kind of been talking about with like Connor and George a little bit, is that once again, like students with who hold marginalized identities are already at a disadvantage when they step onto a university campus, which is just not fair. And then for a professor to like further that disadvantage, like that makes absolutely no sense. So that's one thing that like I would like to work on, is once again bridging the gap between like students who are feeling like uncomfortable like within the classroom, and that's like, something I would like to happen internally with SLU. But externally, and this is something that even Nina was talking about earlier, is that SLU is surrounded by this magnificent, beautiful community, and quite frankly, it is ignored. When I see tours on campus of students and they're just in awe of everything that SLU has, because let's be real, SLU is a really pretty campus. But, but then you're showing them this, you're showing them this luxury, but what are you doing to make sure they actually get here? What are you doing to make sure that these students in the SLU community have the opportunity and the tools for success to actually reach SLU's academic grounds? So that's it.
Jordan? Yeah, I have a lot of things that I want to tackle next year. Before I go into those, I do want to say I'm leaving room in my agenda for next year to kind of tackle issues as they get brought up to me, or the next VP of Academic Affairs. I think it's really important to preserve some time and some schedule for issues that are going to pop up. But to kind of speak to something that Antonia brought up, that's actually something I'm working on right now. I have a meeting scheduled next week with someone in the Title IX office to discuss how we handle procedures of people that don't feel comfortable in the classroom, whether it's something a professor said or another student said. And we're trying to work on a platform so students can report that safely and anonymously to begin with, in order for that to be taken care of now. So hopefully by next year, there'll be something in the syllabus, a place for students to go to be able to report these kind of things, and hopefully create a safer environment for themselves without putting themselves out there to be punished by a professor. Beyond that, I'm really passionate about making sure we get Senate training. So right now, when you're a senator, you're kind of told, oh, just go talk to your dean. And there's not a lot of training in stage right now to teach senators how to do that and what kind of questions
That is time. We'll give you a second to respond after Antonia responds. Sure. The question was like what goals you'd like to accomplish as Vice President. And so this is just a response to that question.
Okay. Oh, sure. Okay, it's back on. Yeah, well, I think that's great that that's something that you're currently working on, and I think that's something that honestly should have been happening a while ago, because I know students, like my friends, my peers, who have told me that they are just feeling like so disconnected within the classroom because of how uncomfortable they are feeling with professors. And I don't know if I'll have that much time for this response, but also something that I would like to accomplish if I were elected as VP of Academics is to help advocate for students struggling with mental health, because they are also students, but I feel like they are students who are ignored within the classroom.
Gordon, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah. Finally, this is a really important thing. The fifth clock tower chord calls for a bridging of the gap between K-12 and SLU and other college universities. I see the VP of Academic Affairs being instrumental in getting some sort of program like Overground Railroad to become a framework for students at SLU to get out into the community and be mentors and influencers of the youth in the surrounding community. So that's a big goal that I'd like to tackle next year as well.
Thank you. So on to the next question. Jordan, you kind of talked about it in your opening statement, but the readership program, what plans or what would you like to see made out of that? Maybe if you could just give us some more details about it.
Right. So in the event that I win this election, the next day, I want to send out a survey, if that's possible, after consulting my team, to find out what students want to read, right? What newspapers do you want to hear about? And figure out what sources people want to be reading. And then every May, we renegotiate contracts with USA Today about the kind of newspapers that we bring in. And I'd like to renegotiate those contracts to involve those other sources, but to also add mobile access for every student in SLU. I happen to think that way more students would read the newspaper if they could access it on their phone or their computer. And so, I mean, that's a pretty detailed process, and looking and doing the research already, what that would involve is renegotiating the contracts, like I said, maybe reducing the supply of the paper copies we already have, and then adding on online access. But I really want to hear students' voices, hear what they want to read, and really take any suggestions that we get when it comes to that.
Thank you. Antonia?
Just to verify, this is about the readership program. This is like the newspapers. Okay, fantastic. So yeah, I think that's also like a pretty cool idea to get like more mobile online things, but I think also something that we should keep in mind is when we're like renewing contracts with certain newspapers is that they have like differing political views, because no one wants to like read the same thing if it's like all like super duper liberal or all like super duper conservative or all like anything that's like super in between. You know, like we want to hear students' voices, like you said, about what they actually want to see, and I think that will help them actually engage more in reading the online sources, that not online, but like newspaper sources that we have.
Do you understand? Do you have 30 more seconds? So on to the next question, the last one that we have. How would you like to see the undergraduate curriculum changed and like the advising experience? And so this goes to you first.
Okay, fantastic. So this is actually something I've thought about a lot since I actually like am an undergrad, as we all are. And like going through like this academic experience, like going like through academic advisors and coaches and such, I feel like there's also just like a disconnect with that, because most of the time like they don't even know what's happening with you academically. Like my friend has a business minor, he's told his advisor this multiple times and she still does not know, it is not on his transcript. So like things like that where like we need for them to like actually listen to us. And what was the first part of that question again?
Part of the core curriculum that you'd like to change.
Okay, the core curriculum, I don't know, because I think like the core curriculum, like at SLU, with this being a Jesuit university, there are some things that definitely like need to stay in place, like theology and like the philosophy, because like that's just like embedded in like what like the Jesuit mission really is. But like as far as like the rest of like the core curriculum, like I think that's something that like all of like the different colleges need to come together and determine themselves, but make it like accessible for people who are like pursuing like engineering majors who like also want to pick up a minor, because they really don't have like that kind of like time or like not even like energy, but like the accessibility, because the core curriculum is so hefty. Then they have to do all their engineering things. But what happens if they want a minor in English? Like they really don't have time to do that.
Thank you. Jordan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's one tangible change that can happen is cross-listing more classes. So when it comes to reforming the core, I don't currently serve on that committee, but I'd like to see what they have proposed, continue to further that, because there's been a lot of thought put into that. But in talking with a couple professors today, actually, they said one thing that would help students to get more classes and take more interesting and diverse classes would be to offer more cross-listing classes. That can be done a multitude of different ways, working with different departments. Another thing is that one of the other clock tower chords is helping to affirm the African American Studies program. And Dr. Carla Scott is the chairman of that department right now. I think working with her to see what we can do to have history classes and other cultural and diversity classes that can be incorporated in the core in different ways to help students, to incentivize students to take those. So that's certainly another thing we can do. Would you mind me at the beginning of that question real quick?
So that's time for you. You have 30 seconds later, but it was about the advising experience. Do you have 30 seconds to respond?
Okay, about like the core curriculum, like and the advising experience, I think that's something that I think about also is that like we're on a Jesuit campus, like we are taught to serve, and service is not a part of that core curriculum, or it is like embedded in like certain classes that like there's a service component for that. So I think that's also something that can probably be talked about of like we are here, like we are trying to follow the Jesuit mission. Let's actually live that out academically and go serve the community around us.
Absolutely. I think that's awesome. One more thing. There's a resource that all students can access right now that is pretty underused. It's called the Degree Audit. Now, if you go on My SLU and then onto Banner, you can actually see what classes you have left in your degree to be completed. And you can make really great use of that, see what you can take, see what you haven't taken yet. And I think working with students to teach them how to use that resource, as well as making them aware that it even exists, would be a huge thing, as well as working with advisors to kind of help lay out a plan for students during their 4 years here.
Do you have any questions from the audience?
Thank you, candidates, and thank you to all the candidates and to all of you who have come out tonight. This is actually a record crowd for the VP debate, so I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. Next Thursday, we have the presidential debate, 7 p.m. in this same room. So come on out for that, bring your friends, and bring your questions. They'll be ready to answer for you. Everybody have a good night.